Hey friends, welcome back to the Finding Joy in Your Home podcast. We are still kind of working on getting things set up here in our new studio, and I think we're getting a little bit closer. So we are back on YouTube again this week as we kind of try to figure out a good way to film. It has been over 100 degrees every single day though here in Texas lately, which just means it is way too hot to record. Our RV just doesn't, it's too hot here in our studio because we have to have the door closed, which means the air conditioner is not blowing in. So we have really just been trying to figure it out, and we're working on it. So I'm glad to be back here in the studio recording with you guys, the studio, AKA meaning our lovely bedroom. We're very, very thankful for this space though. And we're trying to figure it out. So if the audio is a little bit off today, we are working on it. So welcome back. Today we are talking about a really great topic. So we're kind of kicking off a mini series called Healthy Eating. This will be kind of sporadic. We're going to be like kind of sprinkling this series here throughout the next probably couple of months. So if you have any topics within healthy eating that you'd like us to address, let me know. So we're talking about healthy bread. What makes up healthy bread? And then we're going to talk about 4 different options. Like, what are the 4 steps you can do to eat healthier bread, going from like the least impactful, easiest, cheapest, all the way up, and what that means. So it's going to be really fun. We've got a couple of announcements for you. Announcement number 1 is that we are going to be having a fall shop opening. So in the beginning of summer, we kind of closed down our shop, did a final shop. We're not reordering our cookbooks. We're not reordering Sterling Spectacles until at least the fall, if not Christmas. So what we have decided to do to kind of meet in the middle is we're doing kind of a mini shop opening for fall. So it's not going to be a full shop opening. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to findingjoybookstore.com. You can check out, it's where we have our cookbooks for print, Jason's children's book series for kids, our classic reprints, our 5 brand new books we have on pre-order. So what we've decided to do is do a fall mini opening. We are not reprinting cookbooks yet. We're not reprinting Sterling Spectacles. Our classic reprints, those will all be coming back in our Christmas launch. What we are going to be doing is bringing some brand new products though. So we do have 5 books that have been on pre-order. Those will continue to be on pre-order. This will be your last chance to pre-order. Those 5 books, we've got my Christian's Guide to Natural Living. And then we've got a like mini homemaking how-to guide on grinding fresh greens, how to make kombucha. And then Jason has 2 theology guides, one on baptism, one on head covering. So those will be coming. I will be launching, very thankful to be able to get this done before maternity leave. That's actually one reason why we're doing this right now, because the fall is just going to be so packed and crazy. And then we'll be getting ready for our Christmas launch. So we are going to be so glad we were able to pull this off, because it is the perfect timing. I will be launching a slow cooker cookbook. So this will be number 4 in my cookbook series. It will be on pre-order in the next week or so, and they will ship probably out beginning of September is what we're kind of looking at. So within this next month or so is when we're going to be doing those other 5 book pre-orders. All of that will be coming at the same time. And then we also have stuff that's been on back order in the shop. All of that is coming to a head and will all be cleared up in this next month. Praise the Lord. It has been kind of a crazy summer for all of that stuff, but we finally just got shipping notifications on the last of those back ordered items. And it looks like we're going to be fully caught up for our bookstore. So we've had things kind of crazy, and it's all sorting out. So we will have a couple of other little mini surprises in that fall shop opening, and that will be coming sometime beginning to mid-August, well before we have the baby. So that's what we're trying to get all set up so that Jason can really just work on that, because then he can work on fulfilling orders and doing all of that once we have the baby, when I'm going to be hands off. So that's announcement number 2, is I will be taking a very nice extended maternity leave. For you guys, that's not really going to make a big difference, because we're going to have episodes pre-recorded. We're going to have all that kind of work done. Jason will still be running everything, but I will not be actively working. So I won't be posting on Instagram as much. I will be there and sharing stuff, but I'm not going to be in the business running, doing things for a good 4 to 6 weeks. And then I'll kind of slowly be easing my way back in. So there'll be a few changes there, but actually on your end, probably you won't notice a whole lot, because my stuff will still be coming out thanks to the lovely Jason running everything on the back end. Okay, so those are the big announcements. Let's go ahead now and jump into this. So bread is a topic we really need to talk about. This is something that I find is one of the biggest misnomers within healthy eating. And now this is really hard because no matter kind of, what influencers you follow, where you're getting information, you're going to get 100 different opinions on what's truly healthy or not. So part of this is you kind of just have to sift through for yourself and decide where you land for your family. But I will tell you that when I started my healthy living journey 12, 13 years ago, in some ways it was way harder because there was not a lot of research. There was not a lot of, it was so much harder to find things, to find products, to find information. You really kind of had to hunt. But at the same time, today, there's too many voices. There's too many influencers. There's too many Instagram accounts. And it feels like every time you open the internet, something has changed, right? Like there's somebody saying, oh, that's actually not healthy anymore. And it feels like it changes like every 10 seconds. And it can really feel like, well, what is healthy? So for me personally, let's just give like a little overview of what I deem to be healthy eating. What my aim is to just eat real food that God created. And if we can kind of follow that guideline, we don't have to get hung up as much on, well, you're supposed to have this many macros of this and this many of this and that. And, it can get really difficult and overwhelming. And so what I want to do is I want to eat real food the way that God created. And so that's basically is usually called a traditional diet. So if you look back now 100 years ago, 150 years ago, as a starting point, and you look back through all of human history across cultures, the diets are pretty similar. Yes, Asian cultures would eat a lot more rice than American cultures. There you'll find nuances, you'll find differences, but the base is you're eating a lot of things that are grown from the ground, eating meat, eating raw dairy, like looking at what are the things that God created for us to eat. Follow those kind of basic guidelines, and you're going to be good. You look at these fads where, you're supposed to juice everything. Juicing is actually not that healthy for you. It can actually destroy a lot of things. It can mess up hormones, but you get on this craze of like, we have to juice everything. It's the only way to be healthy and live to be 100. There's a lot of other fads that are also pagan and that are very evolutionary. So the paleo movement, 100% evolutionary. And so a lot of people will try paleo and say, oh, I feel so much better because they're cutting out unhealthy bread products. They're cutting out a lot of junk. So in the meantime, yes, they may feel healthier because they're cutting out a lot of stuff. But I also do not think, as we're going to talk about, I don't think bread is evil. I don't think bread is awful. I don't think it's terrible. In fact, I think it's a very good food group that God gave us that we have been eating all the way since the Garden of Eden. And when we follow some of these trends and these fads, we don't even realize how much like the paleo diet is 100% based on the false idea that we evolved from cavemen, and cavemen didn't have the ability for 10,000 years or 10 million years or whatever their theory is. They didn't have fire. And so they couldn't cook, they didn't make bread. And we think the earliest man ate bread. There's just there's differences in worldview. And that actually does affect food philosophy. It really, really does. We need to be smart about this. I'm not saying that every facet of paleo is wrong, but we need, and there might be times where you're like, I followed a paleo diet for a year and it helped clear things up. That's great. That's wonderful. Okay. I'm not here bashing every type of eating that's maybe helped you and your family. But we do need to think critically about what food is, the food that God has given us, and how it nourishes a healthy body. And one reason I get feisty about this with bread is that bread has been so demonized and so villainized in our culture that we think a healthy diet is a plate full of vegetables. And that's it. And that's actually absolutely not the case. There are incredible nutrients in raw dairy, which I know not everybody has access to or can get. That's fine. Or tolerate. That's fine. But meat actually has really good nutrients. Let's not throw out the meat. Bread, flour has incredible nutrients, as we're going to talk about. But it's really, really easy to just think a healthy diet is like eating salads all day long. And like a lot of fruit. And, the problem is, though, it's completely unaffordable, especially in today's economy. If you are trying, I mean, I don't follow them, but I come across some Instagram influencers where it's like this trend now to be like, pack my fridge with me. And they start with like a completely 100% empty fridge. And then they like have all these like ridiculous containers and like, sure, the fridge looks cool, but the food that they're putting in there, I'm like, for like a family of 4, you just spent like $3,000 stocking this fridge for like, and this stuff's going to be gone in like a week. Just if you have the means for that, if you have the access to that, praise God. I mean, increase your grocery budget. That's wonderful. I don't think the goal is to spend as little as humanly possible, but I don't know about you, but I have a very strict budget that I have to stick within. I am not buying raspberries and blueberries and out of season produce every single week because I can't afford it. It doesn't fit within our grocery budget. Even though I really love raspberries and blueberries, I would eat berries every day of my life if I could, but they do not fit in the budget. And so when we try to follow these fads or look at, should we only be eating, all these vegetables all the time? It's very, very expensive. And I also don't think it is actually a well-rounded meal, diet, even though we think, oh, the more vegetables, the better. We need to look at the way God made food, and we need to look at the way God made seasons. And eating seasonally really opens up your eyes as well, because throughout summer, you've got abundance in fresh produce, but come fall and winter, that is traditionally when people would eat a lot more soups and stews and bread. They didn't have as much fresh fruits and vegetables, if none, or they had what they've been able to preserve so that they have canned green beans or, what have you, that they're able to, that they home canned, that they're able to use. And so, yes, we're thankful for grocery stores. We're thankful for modern conveniences in that way, of course, very thankful for that. I'm not saying that we all have to just grow 100% of everything, although that would be amazing. But we need to be thinking this through. So let's talk about berries. Berries are I am, out of any fruit in the world, berries are my favorite. However, when you look at seasonally, berries are in season for like 3 weeks out of the entire year. If you don't jam it, if you don't figure out to can it or freeze it, you don't have access to berries the rest of the year, unless we are importing them from Chile, I don't know where, somewhere warm, different hemisphere, right? So that you can buy strawberries in the middle of winter. So we get this false notion that healthy eating is being able to buy strawberries in December, and that should be part of our diet all year long. And I don't think that's true. I don't think there's anything wrong with buying strawberries in December, but eating more seasonally really opens up our eyes to how has God made our food system. And maybe God knows better than we do on what good nutrition is. Now, of course, the problem comes into play with how we've messed up our food system, right? And we know this, right? So prior to the 1900s, and now the older I get, the more I realize that was not very long ago. I remember being a kid and thinking, oh, the 1950s, like the 1950s were ancient, right? Now I'm like, the 1950s were literally a blink ago, and the 1900s, like anything that's happened now is modern history. And it's just mind-blowing how recent this is. So prior to the 1900s, flour was the staple in households. It was the base of a diet. So you think of like the food pyramid and we're all like, oh, that's stupid. You shouldn't have carbs be like the base. Actually, I think that we should, but it depends on how those carbs are, right? So prior to the 1900s, flour was the staple in households. But it wasn't until the late 1800s, so we're talking, you guys, not that long ago, that steel rolling mills were invented. And this allowed the mass commercially produced white flour that we know today. Prior to that, if you wanted something that resembled white flour, you kind of had to hand sift it. And this really was only for very, very wealthy households who had servants that were sifting it. And they had the money to be able to throw out most of that nutrition. So when you sift flour, I can go grind some flour right now. When you sift it, big pieces are coming out, bigger pieces. That's the bran and the germ. That contains at least 90% of the nutrients in that flour you're sifting out. And so poor households couldn't do that. Like they could not do that because they needed those nutrients. And it was, it was only the very wealthy that could make more delicate pastries and things with having kind of a home sifted flour, which still a home sifted flour still is retaining a whole lot more. Like if you want to grind your own grains, sift some flour because you're making a pastry. Great. You're still retaining a whole lot more of the nutrients than buying white flour at the store. So of course, once white flour gets introduced, it just takes over everything. Suddenly they can produce it cheap. People can buy it cheap. Americans especially just became enamored with this white flour because all of a sudden you could make, Wonder Bread. It's why Wonder Bread took off and was insane. Well, prior to 1900s, we had no problems worldwide of heart disease, of obesity, all of these things that plague us today that are like the number one killers across the board. We had none of those. And they ate bread as the absolute biggest staple in their diet. You'd have, for breakfast, like you read old novels and, for lunch, they'll stop and have a hunk of bread with the side of cheese. That was their food. Now, they were more active than we are today. That's definitely a factor, but it is not the complete picture. Sometimes people will dismiss it and say, well, they were more active. They had labor jobs. Well, people today who have labor jobs still have the same rates of heart disease and all these other factors. It's not the complete picture. So white flour took over. And once white flour took over, it became the staple. There was massive epidemics of anemia, just all of these diseases across the board, across classes. It's really, really interesting actually time to study. So this is when they knew immediately that it was the flour. And there was a lot of advocates saying we need to put more of the bran and germ back in. But I don't know if it was too expensive, whatever. These flour companies decided, we're not going to do that. We're going to enrich the flour. So when you buy white flour today, it is white flour, but it's been enriched because they realized people were getting all these massive diseases from missing out on very essential nutrients. So what they'll do is they'll take enriched vitamins and minerals, which are usually synthetic. So they're fake, which means your body is really not going to be able to absorb it very well, or if at all. And they put it back in to the white flour. So it's enriched. Part of this reason is the bran and germ in flour is not shelf stable. So as soon as you grind grains, so grains come as like little seeds. I'd never seen whole grain, like actual grains before starting this whole journey. And you grind it, you pulverize it, and it becomes flour. It's a really cool process. And in that process, so whole grains are shelf stable for literally 30 years. You could just keep it in a bucket for 30 years. In 10 years, I could reach for that bucket, grind it, and it would make perfect flour. So it is protected. It is in its thing. Once you grind it, you're breaking it open. You're breaking the bran and the germ open, and those contain oils inside. Those oils are like 90% of the nutrition. Well, as soon as this oil is exposed to oxygen, it starts to oxidize. So it starts to break down, which means it starts to go rancid. So this is one reason why when you buy whole wheat flour at the store, and we will talk about different options, there are much better store-bought flour options that you can buy. But typically you go to Walmart and you go buy a bag of whole wheat flour. It is really heavy and it is really dense, and you feel it and you can tell. Now I can tell the difference that it has gone rancid. Versus freshly ground flour is fluffy and it's light. It's not quite exactly the same as commercially produced white flour, but it is much more that consistency than the really dense flour from the store. So what happens when it oxidizes is it starts to lose its nutritional content. And there's different studies that have been done on this. People kind of have disagreements on where the line is, but they say that within about 24 hours of grinding grains, it has lost up to 75% of its nutrients. And then within 72 hours of grinding, it's lost 90% of its nutrients. So most of that whole wheat flour you're buying at the store, trying to be healthier, it's so devoid of nutrients at that point. And so this is where flour is such a big topic, and it can be overwhelming, but I don't want it to be. I've got some really great resources for you. But it can feel really overwhelming. And it's one huge reason why bread products have been labeled so bad. Bread products are terrible because, it is causing a lot of issues. And we start to go, oh, well, I feel so much better when I don't buy bread and bagels and pasta. And, you start staying away from all these things and you're like, I do feel better. Now, we're not even going to get into the fact that wheat is heavily sprayed with pesticides as well. So a lot of times when people think they're gluten intolerant, they've cut out wheat, which means they've cut out glyphosate. And glyphosate mimics so many issues that gluten does. And so many people feel better. It's not magic. They're not lying, but it's not necessarily the gluten. And that gluten's a whole other topic for another day, because there's a lot of things to be said about gluten as well. But it's kind of it's a chain reaction, right? It's not just bread bad, cut out bread. Well, what kind of bread are you talking about? What kind of flour are you talking about? Are we talking about glyphosate, pesticides? It's a big topic there, right? So then, of course, let's move forward in history. We go through the 1980s, go through the 1990s. A lot of us were kids then. And we went through the no carbs craze, right? And we still carry that over today. So, so much of the fads. So we think Whole30, we think, all these different things, cutting out carbs. I mean, to the point where people are cutting out broccoli and other vegetables because there's carbs in those vegetables. It's become such a craze that carbohydrates are so bad. However, especially for women and children, men can absolutely get away with the way that they are designed. Men can get away with a lot less carbs. A no carb whole food diet for, say, Jason might work really well, and it has worked for him in the past, especially for losing weight in a concentrated time. But men can survive off of no carbs a lot easier. Women need more carbs. Children need more carbs. Low carb diets tend to massively mess with women's hormones. So a lot of times we try to do these new diets because we're trying to clean up our diet. We're trying to eat healthier, and you do Whole30 and it makes you feel absolutely terrible. And a big part of that is the lack of carbs. Now, this is not across the board. Some people will do it and say, oh, I felt great. Some people do Whole30 and they've changed their diet so much, the amount of sugar they've taken out, the amount of processed junk, that maybe you do feel better. But it's not necessarily because of the no carbs. There's a lot more to it. So I personally do not think carbs and bread are automatically bad. And a lot of people will say, how do you eat healthy on a budget for a family? Well, a huge part of that is eating healthier carbs. We do eat bagels. We do eat tortillas. We do have bread and sandwiches. And so many people automatically think, oh, that's not a healthy diet. Well, yes, it can be if you do those carbs and the bread right. Then you're not having to all of a sudden make weird vegetable bowls for your kids every single day and spend $30,000 in the process and serve all this unrecognizable food. One of my family's favorite dinners is we do biscuits and gravy. And you're thinking, it's not healthy. Yeah, it absolutely can be. It totally can be if you make freshly ground biscuits. Our biscuits are so good. They're like 4 simple ingredients. They're whole grain, loaded with nutrition. So good. A homemade gravy. You absolutely can make things that are, you can make a homemade mac and cheese. Guess what? You can make it really healthy. For me, healthy living is looking at the foods that your family already eats, that your family already loves, and figuring out simple swaps to make it healthier. All right. So flour can really be a vital part of a healthy diet now, especially for kids. And what I find really interesting, the studies done on this, is that almost all of the nutrients that Americans are deficient in, the things that we lack across the board, are found in very high amounts within flour. Good flour, though. A lot of Americans are eating still a lot of bread, whether it's healthy or not. We're eating a lot of bread. It is not good bread, though. It is not good flour that's giving us these nutrients. So we're going to talk about freshly ground flour for a second. That's not what this whole episode is about, but this really will highlight it for you. So this is what convinced me. The nutrition is what convinced me to dive into freshly ground grains, and the flavor and the amazingness is what has made me stay. So in freshly ground flour, it contains really good sources of fiber, vitamins, and minerals, including iron, magnesium, and potassium, like super high amounts. Whole wheat. And now there's other, we use spelt mostly, which is actually an ancient grain. It has a different gluten structure. You don't have to just eat modern wheat. There's so many grains that you can experiment with. In fact, I don't even keep modern wheat in my house. I don't grind that at all. So there's so many options. But modern wheat contains 40 of the 44 nutrients essential for life. 40 of the 44. It only lacks in like vitamin C, something in those 4. I don't remember what the 4 exactly are, but vitamin C is one of them. But it only lacks those 4. It has everything else. Find another nutrient. Find another whole food that has nutrients in that capacity. So I will encourage you, breadbeckers.com. They have a couple audio teachings. They've got some video teachings that if you're thinking, Jamie, this sounds really cool, but I'm so skeptical. There's no way flour is this good for you. I highly recommend go do some research. And this is what kind of just completely blew my mind. So go to breadbeckers.com. You can poke around, visit their YouTube channel. They have got a lot. So let's transition into some tips. So how do we make our bread healthier? Let's talk about that first. We're going to talk about 4 kind of baby steps. So obviously, number 1 is to switch to whole grain options of bread, tortillas, English muffins, bagels, biscuits, etc. So this is the simple swap, right? So if you really count up how many bread products you're eating per week, we don't even think about it. We don't think about the fact, we pick up some English muffins. Those are white flour. Even if they say whole grain on them, that just means there's some whole grain in them. They're probably not 100% whole grain. The source of that grain is also something we can discuss, but that's kind of the simplest option. So bagels, for example, you can find Killer Dave's has some really decent, they're not perfect, but they're decent whole grain, whole wheat, whatever, 100% bagels. Okay. You can find English muffins. You can find tortillas, but they're hard and they can be expensive. But you can find better options of all of these. So that's a really simple swap, is to start kind of swapping out slowly some different items. Super easy, but also sometimes a much more expensive option as you're switching out. And that's what really led me to looking at grinding my own grains, because when we lived in California, we had one like specialty bread shop. And I think they actually eventually closed down. I don't remember. I don't know why. Anyway, one specialty like bread shop that used they freshly ground their grains that morning, baked bread. So I started researching all this. And this was back when budgets were not as tight because of crazy inflation. And I was like, this is so cool. So I remember we had a growing family. We didn't even eat as much food as we do now. And I went in and I was like, this is so cool. And I was like, their sandwich loaf is like $8, which now today would probably be like $14. I'm like, their sandwich loaf is $8. And then I was looking at all their other stuff and I'm like, like my heart sank. I can't afford this. I just can't. I cannot afford. I'm sure I could buy one loaf, but that's not replacing all that we eat. And that was like truly like, oh, this is really, really good. And so that's when I started looking at, okay, well, if they're making it, how do I make that at home? How do I do that? But I can do it so much cheaper. Like how can I do that? And that's what really, really started my research. So that's the obvious switch number 1. Just start switching out, cutting back on white flour, and starting to bring in other things. Now, let me give you a little caveat. Prior to the last 18 months or 2 years, I did not use white flour in my kitchen at all for a very, very long time. I did not ever would I buy white flour. I only used whole grains that I ground. You can make everything. You can make pastries. We make bagels and donuts. And I mean, the vast majority of what we make is whole grains. But as we settled into our new church, as we started doing a lot more hospitality, and as inflation and prices have increased, I realized with hospitality, a lot of times, my more expensive, freshly ground spelt rolls were just not appreciated as much as if I made really, really, really good white flour rolls. And so there's times where like we had a family over who had, allergies. I don't remember what they had. And so I made the spelt ones and they were so happy and they were so thankful. I've made them before to bring to people. Like there's situations where like that actually would be really appreciated. There's other times for a potluck or for like a fun breakfast or lunch, which we do lots and lots of hospitality, where the white flour version is actually just, it's more appreciated. It's more, you know, whatever. And it's a lot cheaper for me to be able to make on a, you know, very regular basis. And then there are times, so for Christmas morning, we do cinnamon rolls every year. And normally I make cinnamon rolls with our spelt. They taste wonderful, but they're just not quite the same as a white flour cinnamon roll, right? So I buy organic white flour from Azure and I buy it in 25-pound bags. I get a really good price on it. It doesn't have glyphosate. It's a much better version of white flour. And it still is affordable because I'm able to buy it in that 25-pound bag. Actually, I have a 25-pound bag right down there of it that I just got. And that is what I will use occasionally. Like there are times where we're going to make a special treat. It's a holiday and we're going to do something fun because 99% of the rest of the time we're doing our much healthier whole grains, and which we still love. I mean, they taste amazing still, but every once in a while you just want like a regular cinnamon roll. And so this is, to me, this is very much all about balance. This is not, you guys, hopefully if you listen in, if this is not your first episode, you know, I am all about balance when it comes to healthy living. So yes, I am extreme and people go, oh my gosh, she grinds all her own grains. I do, but it's also in balance. And there's been times, so we just moved into RV June 30th. My second set of twins' birthday is July 6th. Well, they requested donuts for their birthday. And we often will do homemade donuts and have a fun blast with it. We were so busy unpacking. The kitchen was new. I mean, it was just cray cray. And so Jason went and bought donuts from some donut place. And who knows the ingredients. And we had those donuts and we thanked the Lord for them. We thanked God for that provision. Our kids had a great birthday and we carried on with our day. Now, I know with allergies and stuff, you can't just always do that, and that's okay. But there absolutely needs to be balance in this discussion. That's my point, okay? You do the best you can with what you have, and you trust the Lord with the rest. So if you can't do exactly what you want to do with whole grains, you can't switch out everything that you want to do right now, and you're still buying half white flour and half the... Trust God in that process. Do what you can with baby steps. Because for me, this was not like, oh, I learned about this and I changed everything overnight. No, it was years of little tiny baby steps of going, okay, could I make a sandwich loaf? I'm going to start there because we eat a lot of sandwiches. So I'm going to start with a sandwich loaf. And that's the only thing I changed out for like 2 years. So baby steps. All right, number 1, switch out white flour to better options. Number 2, start reading your ingredients. So I would say first thing, if you're just like brand new, you're overwhelmed, just go to the store and you're like, that one says whole grain, I'm going to get it. Step 2, when you start to get a little bit more comfortable, you're ready to dive in more, start reading the ingredients on those whole grain options. So a lot of the cheaper whole grain options are going to have high fructose corn syrup. They're going to have other junk. They're not going to be organic, which is fine, but you're going to be dealing with glyphosate. And so start reading the labels. So one example is Costco. So I don't think, okay, so Costco carries Killer Dave's bread. Killer Dave's bread is a really decent option. It's not the best option, but it's decent, okay? Their Killer Dave's is several dollars more expensive than like their generic whole 100% whole wheat bread. And there's a reason for that because the ingredients are just not the same. And now that's okay though. If your budget is over here and you can only get that 100% whole wheat, but it's a lesser quality, get that now and praise the Lord, thank him, ask him to bless it to your bodies. Honestly, do it. If your budget can allow Killer Dave's, great. But then you still look at the ingredients and look at different options. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like learn to read the ingredients and see what's really in it. Sometimes people will kind of act like Killer Dave's is the pinnacle of healthy bread. And it's just not true. It's not the healthiest that's out there. It's not the worst. So do what you can with the budget that you have, right? Do what you can with your resources. If it meant running to 7 different stores because each store had a different whole grain option that was better and you have the time and the capacity for that, do it. That's awesome. It's a great way to use your resources. If you don't have the time or the capacity to do that, then buy the bread that's at the store that you're at and thank the Lord for it. All right? Okay. I get feisty about this because a lot of influencers, a lot of health people will tell you this is the best. You have to do the best or you're failing. And that's not true. God is still sovereign and in control. So that's the second step, is to start reading more ingredients and kind of figure out, okay, what is in this bread that I'm eating? Number 3 is to start making your own bread products with whole wheat or another whole grain. So this is a great next step. This is a very easy way to ease in. So sandwich loaves for me were one thing that I really wanted to start with, because we don't eat bagels every week. We don't eat English muffins. If bagels are like an absolute staple, you eat it every day, start with bagels. For us with little kids, sandwich loaves, like I would just buy sandwich loaves out of convenience. Like we would do peanut butter and jelly. We would use sandwich loaves. You'd have, a piece of bread with your eggs in the morning. Like we could go through a lot of sandwich loaf. So I thought, okay, the most bang for my buck is figuring out how to make homemade sandwich loaves, since that will replace so much in my home. And a lot of times people say, I want to learn how to make bread. I'm going to learn how to make like an artisan sourdough loaf. That's great. But people get overwhelmed. You jump in, you realize it's hard, and then it's not replacing anything. You're still buying sandwich loaf. You're still buying these other things that you need. And then you just kind of stop with the sourdough because it's an extra thing. So what I always recommend is look for something that's essential in your food that's actually going to make a difference on your health and your budget, and start there. Sandwich loaf is a great one. Figure out, okay, you can't have wheat. That's fine. There's tons of other grains that you can use. And so figure out, do I want to get a bread maker? Do I just learn how, you can make, I don't even use a bread maker. I just make sandwich loaves right in the oven, and it is fantastic. So figure out, you got to play with it a little bit though. You got to do a couple of different experiments. You got to try out a few different recipes, find the ones your family likes. But then once you get that recipe down, you can make it in your sleep. Like I can make 4 to 6 sandwich loaves a week, and it's so easy. Like, literally, like takes me 10 minutes of my time to do. And once upon a time, I could not have ever fathomed that making I'm just going to make sandwich loaf. And it's like, easy? Okay. I did not grow up learning how to do that. I taught myself, and it's not that hard once you kind of figure it out. So flour suggestions. Flour can be hard. There's a lot of variances. I would say don't just necessarily go to Walmart and get Walmart's generic brand of whole wheat flour. That's all you have access to. Start there. It will make bread a lot more dense. It will taste more whole wheat. You're going to go, oh yeah, this is whole wheat. King Arthur makes a white whole wheat, which I highly recommend. It is not white flour. It is 100% whole wheat, but it is from hard white grain instead of hard red grain. And so it is a lot lighter. It's a lot fluffier. You can make pizza crust and you're going to go, oh, this tastes pretty good. You use a generic 100% whole wheat and you're going to be like, oh, this is cardboard. So King Arthur's 100% white whole wheat is a great one to start with. But you can also find really good, if you start looking online, you're going to find really good flour options that are way better. You go to Walmart, especially if you go to a health food store, like looking for healthier flours, Whole Food Sprouts, Natural Grocers, you go to any of those and you're going to die because you're going to go, oh, Jamie, I can't afford this either. This little tiny bag of spelt is like $10. Like, and I'm going to use the whole bag to make, 2 sandwich loaves. Those are ridiculously overpriced. The same thing if you go to any of those stores looking for like a good brown rice, you're going to die and you're going to choke on the price. So looking online really is your best bet. If you're in the United States, Azure Standard is my absolute go-to. Any type of flour that you're going to want or need at really, really good prices. So you can buy whole grain spelt flour. I think it's a great place to start. You can buy whole grain einkorn flour, a lot more expensive, but it's really good for allergies and things. And so start with some sort of whole grain flour. You can start with a 5-pound bag, but eventually working your way up to like 25-pound bag, which sounds like a lot, but when you're baking, even for a small family, if you're baking somewhat regularly, it will save you a lot of money. And even if it takes you 6 months to get through a bag, we can easily go through 25 pounds of spelt in a month because spelt is our main thing we use for most stuff. We just made pancakes this morning with spelt. They are very good. And so start with that. And that's how you're going to actually be able to make it a lot more affordable. And you can start experimenting and trying different recipes, and it's going to be healthier. It'll be cheaper. It'll really give you more of a taste of better whole grain flours. The last best step, this is the step I want everybody to do, but I know not everybody wants to, is to start grinding your own grains. I know this sounds like something wacky out of the 1800s, because it is. However, today we have modern electric grain mills, and people go, oh, isn't it hard? So we made, I didn't actually make them. My 11-year-old and my 7-year-old made freshly ground spelt flour pancakes for us this morning. If they can do it, you can do it, because it's not difficult. So what you do is, I have an electric grain mill that, yes, we brought into the RV. If I can find the space for it, so can you. Electric grain mill, and you dump the grains in. It starts making flour right into your bowl. Takes like 90 seconds, maybe a couple minutes if you're making massive quantities like we tend to do. While it was grinding, Micah went around and got the eggs and the oil and the whatever, all the other things that he needed, and kind of assembled those and got him ready to go. And by the time he got everything out, the flour was done, and he started making spelt pancakes. Like, it doesn't take any extra time. It's not difficult. It's not hard. The learning process is the hard part. That is the process that you have to kind of get over, and the initial investment. So there is initial investment of getting a grain mill. That's the hard part. And you go, oh, am I going to be able to use this? What if I don't end up liking it? Now, the good news is there's a really hot market for secondhand grain mills. So if you do get a grain mill, you give it a shot, you don't like it, whatever, you can resell it. You absolutely will be able to resell it. I know many people who've been able to resell theirs. You're not going to get maybe necessarily 100% of what you paid, but like, you will be able to resell it. So don't let that stop you, because I know it can be hard of like, I'm buying this appliance and I don't even know if we're going to really like it. But milling your own grains, it's not as hard. It's not as overwhelming. It's not as complicated as you think. And it has been the absolute #1 biggest blessing and change in our household that the entire family loves. So let's talk really briefly. I've got 3 tips for you on getting started with grinding your own grains if you want. So let's say though, first, grinding your own grains, why? Absolute best nutrition, hands down, out of anything. So we talked about, like, once you grind flour, it loses its nutrients within 24 hours, it loses like 75% of its nutrients. By 3 days, it's lost like 90% of its nutrients. Well, that white flour that you just picked up at the store has been on the shelf for months. Like, what is in there? So once you bake though, with that flour, it locks in all the nutrients. It doesn't continue losing. So that's why when we made spelt pancakes, we ground it and then baked with it immediately. And we have a bunch of leftover pancakes that we will eat all week. We'll just have them in the fridge and we'll eat them then. Those nutrients are locked in. So the nutritional value, absolutely 100% superior all across the board. Second is it's far cheaper. So yes, I have absolutely 100-fold paid off my grain mill. Like, no question asked. Like, not even, I mean, within your first couple of months, practically, you're going to pay off your grain mill, especially if you have a larger family. You go through a lot of grain. But within the first year, you will pay off this investment 100-fold, because it's going to last you. Your grain mill will last forever. And you will absolutely save so much money. Buying your own grains is just amazing. And it tastes incredible. So I didn't know about the taste. I did not know about the taste. I thought, okay, I bought, like, for years, I was like, I'm going to make healthier pizza. So I buy like the whole wheat from the store, and it would just be cardboard. And so you imagine freshly ground must be exactly the same. It is not. It is entirely different. It is amazing. In fact, I make this coffee cake with freshly ground spelt, and I bring it to like every party everywhere. And it is my most requested recipe that people are like, please bring your coffee cake. People rave over it. Like, it is incredible. And it's made with whole grain spelt. And so, like, you can make amazing things, and you're going to go, this is whole grain. Like, that is how different it is. I promise you. Okay. So those are some reasons why you want to do this. So here's some steps. First of all, start with research. If you're thinking, Jamie, okay, this sounds kind of cool, but also overwhelming. That's where I was for a long time. In fact, it took me like 4 years to pull the trigger because back then, I mean, there's a lot of people nowadays who talk about freshly ground grains. There was not back then. Like it was not a thing. I was a weirdo freak for grinding my own grains. So start with research. Okay. Start with research. Just start, like, watch some videos, go on YouTube, watch some videos of how people do it. Get like a good, good picture of it. And okay, what are people making, and kind of see what it is. Now, I have a whole course called Freshly Milled. And it teaches you everything you need to know. It goes over in depth nutrition. I mean, especially if your like husband is kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this. It goes over nutrition. It goes over why. It goes over other ingredients that you need. It goes over how to pick a grain mill. I have a whole video with like 6 different grain mills out in front of me, and I show you the differences, how to pick one for your family. I mean, it teaches you everything on getting started. It's really, really, really helpful. So the Freshly Milled course normally sells for $60, which I think is 100% worth it. And actually, it was one of my all-time best-selling courses ever, for $60. However, it is now part of our Joyful Home app/website. So you can actually get access to the full course for $10.39. So if you're even marginally interested, get the course and start going through it. But the thing is that $10.39 includes hundreds of other resources, not just on freshly ground grains, but like we have a canning course. We have all of our past conferences in there, audiobooks, ebooks, my brand new book, A Christian's Guide to Natural Living. Everything in there you get access to for $10.39 a month, and you can cancel at any time. So you could just sign up for a month to go through this course for $10. Okay. So check it out at findingjoyinyourhome.com/app. And honestly, out of the reason I did this course is there's no other book out there. There's no other resource that takes you step by step through all of this. There's no other single resource that I could point you to, let alone the fact that even buying a book on it would be $20, right? You can go through the whole thing for $10. Go to findingjoyinyourhome.com/app. There's a coupon code on that page that you can use, Joyful Home 20. You can check it out and it'll get you started literally on everything. Okay. So step number 2 is then to pick out your grain mill. Again, there's a whole big long video in there that teaches you all the ins and outs of the different grain mills, how to pick the right one for your family, because there are differences. I don't think there's necessarily one standout single grain mill. There's different options, which can get really confusing. And when do you know, can you get a cheap one? Can you not? There are some really good lower cost options out there, but it's still going to be an investment. So start doing that research on purchasing a grain mill. My recommendation just for a brand overall is Nutritional. I've been really happy with them. Their customer service is absolutely outstanding. I've been working with them for years. I've had people say, oh, this piece isn't working. And I say, reach out to their customer service, and they get taken care of every single time, which is, they'll send replacement pieces. That's a big deal when you're trying to buy, an investment piece in your kitchen, right? So Nutrimal is a great one, but there's a lot. So you can research, but get your grain mill. And then number 3, the third recommendation is to find good recipes that use freshly ground flour to start. So a lot of people jump in and they're like, I want to take my grandma's biscuits recipe and make it freshly ground. What do I do? How do I make it different? Eventually you'll get to that point. I can take any recipe and just play with it. And I go, oh, it's a little dry. I'm going to add a little more liquid, because freshly ground grains do behave a little bit differently. So your best bet when starting out is start with recipes that use freshly ground grains. It'll be so much easier. So Brad Becker's has a great beginner cookbook. That was my first cookbook that I ever got for freshly ground grains, was from Brad Becker's. It's fantastic. You can get it on Amazon. And my first cookbook Volume 1, gives you over 100 pantry recipes. So how do you cook things out of dried goods? So it'll give like recipes for beans, but also most of the recipes are grains. How do you cook with grains, different grains? My sandwich loaf recipe is in there, my English muffin, my bagel, my tortilla, all of these things we talked about today are in that cookbook. So you can get the print copy. Those orders will open up again at Christmas time. However, my cookbook Volume 1 is now also in the Joyful Home app. So for $10, you can get access to my freshly ground course and my cookbook and hundreds of other resources. We know budgets are tight right now. We know it's hard. And so instead of spending $60 on that digital course and $40 on the digital cookbook, you get, instead of $100, you get access for $10 and everything else that we have, which is really, really, really fantastic. We're trying to pack it with so much stuff that it helps you, gives good resources, but also helps you save money so that $10 is a good, worthwhile investment, because we know even $10 right now is tough. And so we've tried to give you everything. In fact, my second cookbook is also now in the app. Oh, you just got to go check it out. Go to findingjoyinyourhome.com/app. All right. So those are my beginning steps for you. I do have some other resources. There's some other podcast episodes we've done on freshly ground grains in the past. But hopefully we had some fun today, kind of just talking about philosophies of healthy eating and bread, and I could talk about this forever. So I will be done now. But we will continue this healthy eating series. We'll have some other kind of just random, what sugars are good to cook with, and natural sugars. And we'll have some really random topics that I think are going to be really fun. So those will kind of carry us into my maternity leave. I'm getting those written right now. So let me know if you've got any topics you want me to cover in this. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Don't forget to go check out the Joyful Home app at findingjoyinyourhome.com/app. You can access it as an Android or iPhone app. The apps, you guys, these are beautifully designed apps. We're working with this incredible developer to give you, that's what people get blown away, is the experience on the app. You can pull up a video or audio, an audiobook, anything, listen to it, and then close out of the app, and it'll still play in the background, which is huge. You can download for offline use, offline listening, offline viewing. There's audiobooks for kids, audiobooks for dads, for men. All of our past conferences, it's ridiculous what's on there. We have a bunch of new stuff coming out this month as well. We've got, in September, we're going to be launching our brand new homesteading conference. This will be our third one. The first two are already there in the app. So you got to go check it out. findingjoyinyourhome.com/app. We've got that 20% off coupon going on right now. You can use Joyful Home 20, which that coupon code will be on that landing page. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. We'll see you guys back here next week for the next episode.